Hello and welcome to the garden. Well, my job today is to sort through our pepper, chilli and aubergine plants and pick out those that I want to pot on, maybe keep a couple of spares, and probably abandon some of the more raggedy looking plants. So the seedlings were looking really fantastic. We had a couple of setbacks though. First was that 3 varieties didn't germinate. 1-year-old seed should have been absolutely fine, but almost nothing from 3 varieties. So I had to re-sow. From the fresh seed we had tons of seedlings, so we're not short of plants. Then we had a second problem. When the storm came through, we lost power for a good 5 days, and that really is a bit of a disaster at this time of year, because I'm relying on the propagators out here to keep these plants comfortable, especially through the cold nights. And they will do that, but not when the power's out. So we had to move the plants indoors. After about a day or so though, the house was freezing cold. I mean, it was really, everything dropped down. It takes a while for the house to get cold like that, but after a day, 2 days at the most, it was really cold in there, colder than these plants ideally would like to have. The other problem is that the light levels are really poor indoors. We don't have anywhere which gets really good light. We've got some windows that get some light in the morning and some that get it in the afternoon, but we don't have anything that's, say, south facing or anywhere where we could put this actually quite a huge quantity of plants and keep them in reasonable conditions. So it was too cold and too dark. As a consequence, these plants, they're not too happy with me, and some of them are pretty leggy. So I've got more plants than I need, I think, because when we had germination problems to begin with, in most of those pots I put 2 or 3 seeds, and I then pricked out some extras just to make sure that I wouldn't be short of plants, and I'm really glad that I did. It's always a good policy to have spares, but more often than not they don't end up being used. And this time that policy is probably going to save our plants, because I think I should be able to leaf through these and pick out all of the dodgy ones and discard them. Anyway, let me show you what they look like. So here I have plants from the second sowing. So I've got 2 of the bullhorn peppers, a red and a yellow, and then I've got Friariello, that's a replacement for the Frigitello, none of which germinated. Now these plants all look fine. I think they've been developing a little bit slowly, and I mean that could be as a consequence of getting a bit chilly. I'm hoping that these will come good though. They don't look too bad, and you know, the light levels are increasing and I'm keeping them warm here, so hopefully they will pick up and get going soon. I mean, there's an argument that perhaps I should have re-sown some of these, but time was getting on and I don't know whether that will turn out to have been the right call or not. In this propagator I've got a really mixed bag of plants. I don't think I've actually lost a single plant from this batch, but some of them don't look very happy at all. We've got quite a few small ones in here, but those are another variety from the second sowing, so I'm not worried about those. You can see on some of these that there's damage on the leaves. I'm going to try and abandon those if I've got enough of the others. Some of the plants, they're developing really a little bit slowly, and I think some of these are just not happy plants, and I will try to sift those out. Some of the others are growing away quite happily. I mean, this is Joe's Long Cayenne. It's a great little plant, and it's growing very happily. This one next to it, what's that? That's Sweet Banana. Again, it's growing very nicely, but it is rather leggy, and that's a consequence of being 5 days in poor light. And once they sort of start out that way, that's how it continues. So anyway, I should be able to pick out enough decent plants from this bunch. Ideally, I want to abandon these where they've been really damaged and they just don't look happy. This is not what I want to see on my pepper plants. I usually get much better plants than that. So yeah, it's a little bit disappointing. It's a bit frustrating, but I need to pot these on and help them move along. And it will be better when they are in bigger pots. I will drop them a little deeper, of course, because they're leggy, but also they'll be spaced out a bit more and they won't be so crowded as they are in there. That doesn't help with legginess either. So I've got these in 7cm square pots, and I really like those. That's a good size for starting plants, and it's great that they are square for 2 reasons actually. The first is, of course, that they fit better. There's no wasted space that you get with round pots. The other is that square pots are actually better for the root system. So with a round pot, the roots just tend to circle round if they're in there a little bit too long, and that's not great. Doesn't happen the same way with square pots. So these actually do a really good job. And yeah, I like those 7cm pots. I wish I had some good sized square pots to move them on into, but I don't. What I do have is a pile of old 1 litre pots that we've collected from various places or been given, and I've got quite a lot of these, so I'm not going to go buying larger square pots when I've got all these to hand, but these are not so convenient. 1 litre is, I think, a pretty good size to move these into. I'm going to give them quite a bit more compost. There's plenty of depth here, so I can lower these a little bit. I'm not going to go mad because I want to put some fresh compost down the bottom as well, not just all piled on the top where it's not going to do a lot. They can stay in these then almost certainly until I put them in their final places. Now some of these plants will go into the greenhouses or the polytunnel in the beds, but a lot of them are going to go back in here in 10 litre pots. That's a really good size for growing peppers. I do like that. You can put a nice rich soil in there, gives them plenty of nutrition all the way through the season. Don't have to do a lot of liquid feeding. It's not really necessary. Not if you give them some nice rich soil to start with, and 10 litres is a good size. So I should be able to get, I think, about 40 plants in here. I don't think we quite had that many last year, and I'm only going by the number of drippers we've got on our watering system. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. It looks like I only had 16 plants along this side. I had 20 on that side, so I'm hoping I can get 40 in here this season. I should be able to squeeze them in somewhere. So I'm going to pick out 40 of what I think are the best looking plants. I've got a piece of paper here with notes on roughly how many I would like of each variety. Whether I can find that many good ones or not remains to be seen, and I'm going to get them shifted. It's quite early to be potting them on. I think they could stay in these pots quite happily for a while longer, but at the stage they're at, I think it might be a good idea to get them into some richer soil anyway, and of course that gives me the opportunity to sort through them and to maybe sink a few a little bit deeper. Anyway, that's the job. So if we take a look at the Joe's Long, I've got 4 reasonably nice looking plants here. There's not too much damage on these. They are of course a little bit leggy, but I mean, here's a couple of the others. These are dreadful. I mean, just look at the state of that. I mean, that's no good at all. Dodgy leaves, weak plants. That one, I think, is going in the compost. That's no good. That one, Well, actually, I think he would recover okay. Pull those dodgy old leaves off, drop it deep in a pot and let it go. But the number I need, as it happens, is 4. I will probably keep that one around for a while longer as a spare, not potting it up, but just keep it for a while as a spare. At this stage, it's very unlikely that I will lose any plants or have any problems. Well, it's quite unlikely that one would lose any plants anyway, but still, those 4 are okay. And I've got a few more raggedy ones in the propagator that I think I will abandon as well. But yeah, I mean, this is dreadful. I've never produced plants as bad as that, but I can blame the storm at least, rather than really bad gardening. In the trug here, I've got some richer compost. So there's no coir in this. This is a proper potting mix, not for seed sowing. It's got quite a bit of organic matter. It's got some feed in there, some fish blood and bone. Yeah, they should enjoy this, and it should have plenty of nutrition there to keep them going until I move them on again, and that won't be until end of April or into May, depending on the weather conditions at the time. If we're really lucky and it's warm at the end of April, we'll be able to get these set out early. Last year, April was really cold and we didn't get this done until well into May, so you do have to be prepared to hold them back until the weather is suitable. But yeah, this mix should keep them happy for a while anyway. Right, Joe's Long is going to get an upgrade. I was going to go into these 1 litre pots, but these plants are already pretty big, so I'm going to put those, and probably only those, in some 2 litre pots. These have got much better depth. I can sink them down a little more than I can in there, so I better not put too many in these because I don't have enough space for them, but I could certainly afford to put a few plants in them, those that really need that depth. So right, so get some soil down the bottom of those. Now for this, I'm going to pinch off those seed leaves. We've got a nice network of fine roots in there. It's not pot bound yet. This is a really light compost mix. I imagine that the roots on these are probably further along than lots of the others, but let's get that in there, and then I will top up around it. I'll put a little bit more underneath. Yeah, that's going to be fine. I don't want to firm this down too much. I'm going to pack it in reasonably well. Yeah, that's fine. Just leave a little bit of space at the top for watering. Then I can give it a good soak. That should do nicely. He looks a lot better in that pot than he did in the small one. This compost mix here, it's a blend of various ingredients, but it's It's a little bit, let's say, rustic. I wouldn't want to sow into it, but it's going to be great for these young plants to get down into. And if we continue to get a lot of vertical growth, and I think this one does have a fairly vertical growth habit, I can always come along a bit later, maybe when it's a few inches higher, and pinch the top out, and then I will get side shoots develop from the leaf axils here, and I'll end up with a slightly bushier plant. I don't want them too bushy. They're going to be close together on the bench here eventually, so it's not a huge amount of room here. I'll have a lot of plants, but not so much room for each of them. It's a bit of a chilly forest in here in the summer, but if need be, I can pinch those out and they will be a little bit more bushy. I don't know if this will show up on the camera, but you might just be able to make out at the bottom here, there are young roots starting to come from the stem, and peppers, a bit like the tomatoes, will produce some more roots from the stem, and that can be handy, especially here where I'm burying it fairly deep. Well, these are a lot smaller. They're still pretty tall for their stem diameter, so I'm not that pleased with them. This is a weak looking plant, but never mind, that's what I've got to work with. This one looks a lot better. That one looks reasonably healthy actually. Well, they're not so big, so they can go in these smaller pots quite happily. I don't expect they've got a huge amount of root in here. No, not a lot, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. You don't want to leave them in the pots until they're all pot bound. That doesn't help them at all. So they're definitely not pot bound. And those roots should get into this compost pretty quickly now, I would think. Hopefully give it a bit of encouragement to stop messing about and get growing. Well, that's today's job. I will pot on as many as I can. The smaller ones I'm going to leave for another at least 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks before I move those on as well. But I need to get this whole area sorted out because I need to make space for the tomatoes. So I will be sowing those rootstocks very soon, and yeah, I'll be sowing a lot of those because I'm still not 100% confident in my grafting. We had reasonable results last year. About 80% of those plants that I grafted, they went on to be fine plants. So that's not bad. Hopefully I can get that, let's say, to 90%. If you're experienced with it, it should be 95%, but I would be delighted to get 90%, but I'm not even going to allow for 80 or 70 or 60. I'll probably assume that I'm going to lose half of the plants, and then I should end up with plenty. I don't mind grafting twice as many as I need. I want to make sure that I've got all the plants that I need to fill up the greenhouses and the polytunnel with lovely tomatoes. Anyway, I'll get on with this. I'll show you what it looks like when I've finished. Oh, here's some of the plants that I don't think I'm going to bother potting up. These are in a dreadful state. There's so much damage on these leaves. They are so leggy. This one can't even hold itself up. No, these aren't good, and I've never produced such awful plants. I mean, there's nothing I could do about it. There was nowhere else to put them, but yeah, we really do rely on the electricity here to keep the propagators going, keep these plants warm. And when that fails, we are in a bit of trouble. Of course, it doesn't normally fail for 5 days. That was quite exceptional. Well, the weather was quite exceptional. But yeah, that's the result. I've potted up those that have the least damage. I mean, not all of these are very good. Those in the corner here, they've got some damaged leaves. There's nothing I can do about that. And they are a bit floppy. I mean, I might have to put some split canes in and tie them up until they've strengthened a little bit, but we'll see what happens. I'm hoping that having potted them up, they've got their feet in some better soil there. They'll get a bit of a feed. They are more spaced out, and hopefully after a week or so they will respond with some improvement. But they are a little bit sad, unfortunately. None of the aubergines were great. The Violetta differenza is probably the best out of these three. Long purple is, well, leggy purple. And Rosa sfumata, well, I thought I was going to lose these plants actually, and I haven't, but they are just a little bit rubbish. But they might yet pick up, and I hope so. Otherwise I'm going to be short of those. Well, I must confess that I am a little bit disappointed today. I didn't realise there were quite so many really rather ragged specimens, but there's nothing I could have done about it, and sometimes things go wrong. That is part of gardening. It's a bit of a pity that it happened with the peppers and chilies, because although the tomatoes are undoubtedly our most important crop, the plants I most enjoy growing are the peppers and chilies, and yeah, it's a little sad to see them in such a sorry state. Well, that is more than enough of me being miserable. I hope to return with happier plants and a smile on my face in the next video. That is all for this one. Thanks ever so much for watching, and bye for now.